Take 1 zillion. Bonjour, la classe, and welcome to episode number 4 of my French Revolution vlogcast. And in this episode, we're going to look at the shorter term financial problems of the 1780s that run into the French Revolution. Starting with the controller generalship of Charles Calonne, which was from 1783 to 1787. Now, at the start of this controller generalship, it was felt that France would benefit from the American War of Independence. But actually, quite quickly, what they found was that even in the circumstances after the defeat of Britain, a strong navy was essential to having transatlantic trade, and France just didn't have that. And so, the idea that they could invest in that, of course, also demanded money, and that just kind of led into this spiral of economic problems that France was already experiencing. So by the mid-1780s, the debt crisis was becoming more pronounced, and Charles Calonne was faced with decisions to make. He was unable to borrow more money because lenders were beginning to spot they were less than likely to get that money back. And there was great nervousness about lending the French crown money anymore. And so the only other option was to reform the tax system, in part to get more money, but also to demonstrate to lenders that they were making a sound investment, and perhaps they would lend more money to France. Charles Calonne developed the idea of having provincial assemblies around France, which would set taxation at a local level. And he also wanted to bring in a land tax and end the corvée. He took these ideas to the Parlement, the Paris Parlement. Remember, these are the law courts that would have to enforce these new taxes. And they didn't like the ideas. And so they turned him down. Partly, we think, because they didn't like Calonne as a person. He had been involved in some corrupt land deals. He personally was quite spent a lot of money on himself. He was quite sort of loose with his own money, and that undermined the credibility of what he was saying about France needing to go through a period of austerity. And he was also unpopular with the people because these ideas of creating new taxes didn't go down too well. And he'd already tried that in Paris by having the Ferme Générale wall, a tax wall, built around Paris so that you couldn't enter Paris without going through the tax houses, customs houses that were punctured this wall around the city. So Parliament turns him down, and Calonne goes back to the king and says, look, if we want to do this, we need to get the Assembly of Notables assembled and get them on board. Now, the Assembly of Notables hadn't met since 1626. It was exactly what it sounds like. It's kind of a higher body than the Parlement, and it is literally an Assembly of Notables. Calonne was pretty confident that they would stick with him because there were 7 princes in there, 2 brothers of Louis, 7 archbishops, Lafayette. It was loaded with the great and the good of France. But when they came together, they also voted against Calonne, again largely because they didn't like him, more than because they didn't agree that his ideas were necessary. So Calonne had to resort to asking the king for the king's backing. The king had also fallen out with him because Calonne kept underestimating the amount of debt France was in, and so Calonne was pushed out. And in came Loménie de Brienne, who was Archbishop of somewhere or other, I forget. He was only Controller General from May 1787 to August 1788. And no sooner had he taken charge than he discovered that Calonne was exactly right. The French debt was at 140 million livres. It soon went up to 161 million livres. It was out of control. And Brienne, in fact, brought forward pretty similar reform ideas to Calonne's, a land tax, removing the corvée, having a tax that was paid by everyone. And the Assembly of Notables said, well, yeah, we can see you thinking, but we don't really want to be the ones who vote for this. In fact, there's a great cartoon that you've probably seen in the books where this kind of monkey figure is asking the poultry to vote for which sauce they'd like to be eaten with. This idea that they would you get turkeys to vote for Christmas? Well, why would you ask these people to change the deal to be worse for themselves? And so they say, well, what we really think you need is an Estates General. Now, the Estates General is the top level of ancien regime representation, very, very irregular in terms of its meeting. But the idea was that if you were going to change the whole basis of the ancien regime, then you should have the ultimate body to to vote for that, to authenticate that. Parliament also resisted Brienne's ideas, and they sort of claimed that they were on the side of liberty against a tyrannical king. Now, again, they were voting really to protect themselves, but they were trying to pretend, or they did pretend, that they were on the side of the people. And you can see here one of the themes of the French Revolution, potentially, being that the bourgeoisie are claiming to act on behalf of France, but really they mean they're acting on behalf of themselves. Eventually, of course, the sans-culottes become fed up with that idea and spot that they're not really getting as much out of the revolution as they think they ought to have done, and they come in and take over the whole revolution. Anyhow, Brienne's time was running out. The king suggests he might even use a lit de justice to get it through. He banishes the Parlement, Paris Parlement, to Tours outside of Paris. But just as they're sort of starting to kind of bluff each other out, actually France runs out of money. It's revealed to Brienne there's only 400,000 livres left in the bank accounts, and the credibility of his government is in complete shreds, and he resigns. And the king, in desperation, brings back Necker, who is the only person that anyone has any confidence in that can actually magic some solution out of it. Necker immediately then starts to look at bringing together the Estates General and trying to thrash out a solution that will change France, change the basis that it's on. Whilst all this is going on, the economic meltdown of the French government, there's also a simultaneous parallel meltdown of the whole French economy. And this is very important because it means that the people are now also desperate for change. This is best evidenced by, in July 1788, there's a massive hailstorm that sweeps across most of France, from Rouen in the north to Toulouse in the south. That's followed by drought and a very harsh winter. And these things add up to shortage of food and a rising price of basic goods. For instance, a £4 in weight, a £4 loaf of bread would feed, in fact, 2 £4 loaves of bread would feed a family of 4 every day. They would need that. That would normally cost half their wages. They cost 8 sous, S-O-U-S, 8 sous in the summer of 1787. By the October of 1787, that price had already risen 50% to 12 sous. And by February 1789, it had risen to 15 sous, or almost double what it had been. That means that just the bread was costing almost the entire wage for a family for 4 every day. And this was a situation which ordinary people just could not cope with. And this is why they're so quick to join in with the revolution when it starts in 1789. Thanks for listening and watching. And next time we'll look at those events of 1789 and try and pinpoint where the revolution starts. See you then.